Thanks for watching another video from GoEngineer. My name is Bruce Schaller, and this video is going to be on creating model-based definition documentation using the model-based definition add-on inside of SOLIDWORKS. What I'm going to be showing is how to duplicate the same information or the necessary information that is needed on a drawing, really by duplicating the drawing that was made for this linear stage that holds linear rails on both sides for the wafer fab system. And if you look, this drawing has 4 microns, 1¼ microns of tolerancing for surface profiling, flatness, and perpendicularity. Pretty tight tolerancing, let alone some tolerancing for the tolerancing, let alone some tolerancing for the true positioning of the model. So what I really want to do is duplicate this information that's on this multi-sheet drawing for all the critical dimensions. Now, if you're using model-based definition, it's not really necessary to dimension everything that is going to be in your block tolerance. So everything on this drawing that has 3 decimal places, if the vendor is working off the 3D model, a lot of these dimensions are really not necessary in the model-based definition environment. So let me just get started and we can go in and at least show you where some of these tolerances came from. If you're using Schneeberger's linear bearing rail, you can go to their technical information guide. And if you're got their tolerances and micrometers, and you can go in for the size rail bearing that you're using and get the information from them. What I'm going to do is really mimic or duplicate what's on this drawing, starting from scratch with the linear stage model. So to get started, what I usually like to do is go through some settings, because generally somebody that's not using model-based definition won't have some of the things turned on or set correctly. So let's first begin by going through some of those settings. So I like putting on view component annotations and view top level annotations. This lets you see all the 3D dimensions you're putting on at really any level on the model, either at the part or assembly level. Now when you do that, it can go ahead and turn on things like your holes. So you might want to go into that particular feature and hide the threads if you don't want the threads showing in the different views, like your front view, top view, side view, that you're going to create inside the 3D views using the model-based definition tool in there. So a couple of things to get started, or just normally what I go through. I like going into my tree, and when I start, I set my tree display to feature based. I'll eventually change it to annotation based, but I'll show you what this is all about during this demonstration. And also, I like going into my settings for all my model-based definition dimensioning, formerly called Dimexpert. So in some places, the menu, you still see model-based definition, or I should say you now see model-based definition dimensioning. And in others, you'll still see it called Dimexpert definition, or I should say you now see model-based definition dimensioning. And in others, you'll still see it called Dimexpert dimensioning in a few other areas of the menu. But let's go into the Dimexpert dimensions and see what I've done to set my tolerancing. And see what I've done to set my tolerancing. This is set to block tolerance. This is what I prefer to use, and it's just saying, hey, this is what my single, double, or triple decimal place tolerance is going to be. And this would match what's in the drawing's title block along with the angle. This is also information that can be carried along with the model inside of file properties. So if it changes here, it changes in your 3D PDF or any documentation that you create for manufacturing, such as a drawing. It's all tied to the properties, which is the way I like to do it. So from there are some size dimensions that I want to go in and look at. So if I ever get a width dimension on here right now, it's going to go ahead and use this tolerance. Maybe if I use a fillet radius dimension, maybe I want that to go from my block tolerances that I've just set in my previous wizard. So that'll pull from here. Some geometric dimensioning tolerances, such as applying your maximum material condition to the part and on true positions in here. So I could go ahead and check or uncheck that if I want that to be automatic in the model, and I can always add it again later. So that's really all I'm going to do. Although I could comb through here and do more, I want to leave it because, you know, I go back to this page during the process and change things for the bulk of dimensions that I'm doing in there. So that's really enough to get started. From here, I like querying the model a little bit because depending on how the model was created, it will make model-based dimensioning go a little easier, but it doesn't really matter if it wasn't created with the intent of doing it using model-based dimensions. You can still make the features into what I would say is like the same thing. So what I'm talking about here is like on this pocket. So what I'm talking about here is like on this pocket. You can see if I would have hit the fillet command and picked all 4 of these edges, I would have a fillet that had an 8x on it. And this has been drawn and filleted in the sketch mode and mirrored in the sketch mode. So it's not going to have that counter on there. And I'll show you the way to do that. This hole that needs a true position tolerance on it is really the same thing. If I click here, you really see there's no patterned hole here. It was done with cuts at different times. So if I put a true position tolerance on with some locating dimensions, I'm really going to want to show a 4x on here. So some of this stuff I can take care of right away in the model if I see it, or I can do it as I go along. But let me show you, if I go under the model-based definition tool and click on feature pattern and go into manual patterns, this is a dimensioning pattern, unlike a feature pattern inside of SOLIDWORKS normal creation. This is just going in and telling the model-based definition that when I go in and dimension this, that it'll have that 4x counter on there. So you can see what the model-based or the Dimension Expert Manager tab gives you when you're under tree display showing feature-based. It'll show you the features that you've gone in there to dimension. And if you wanted to add more to this or delete, you could always go to the edit feature and go right back to the creation time and fix whatever you might have boo-booed. So that's really all I really need to do to get started on this. And again, I could have started, but I've done this before. I did it about a week ago and I realized that it came up with a 2x counter and I really want a 4x counter. So since I know I could have started, but I've done this before. I did it about a week ago and I realized that it came up with a 2x counter and I really want a 4x counter. So since I know that right now, I'll go ahead and put my whole pattern feature in. From there, I like going into the dimension auto dimension scheme. And then I go in and select, in this case, especially since it's a tight tolerance part, the geometric dimensioning and tolerancing option down here. Obviously, it's a prismatic part. It's not a turn part that's going to go on a lathe. So what you're doing here is you're picking your primary datum and you're picking your secondary and your tertiary. Before I go on with my primary, since my primary datum really is where each one of these rails is going to sit, I want to go in and use the create compound it goes to. So that's a model-based definition standard for it to highlight the dimensions so the manufacturer is not confused on what something's pointing to, particularly when there's a lot of dimensions pointing to it. From there, I can use the shortcut in SOLIDWORKS rather than going all the way over to the menu and clicking the secondary. I can right click and say accept that datum feature and it automatically moves to the next datum and I can click datum B. Again, this is really all stuff coming from the Schneeberger Tolerance Technical Specification Guide. From here, I can go ahead and again right click and say accept datum and select C. You can also just right click afterwards and it'll go ahead and move down to the next feature as well. So that's a little tip and trick for shortcuts so you don't have to keep moving over to the left side every time you pick something. From here, I'm just going to go ahead and select the whole, and I very rarely do all features in the part time you pick something. From here, I'm just going to go ahead and select the whole, and I very rarely do all features in the part over here. That just puts a hodgepodge of dimensions out that might not make a lot of sense. So I like really taking them in little piecemeals at a time, and you'll see what I mean as I go through and recreate the information that was in that traditional drawing. So from here, I'm really done. I can go ahead and hit the checkbox here, and you're going to see what it's done. Now, since I didn't go in and tell it an orientation to put me in, it's kind of shoved certain dimensions in my top orientation, since I forgot to put it on like my front or maybe a better orientation for putting these dimensions on. But you do notice it did go in and put my 4x on there, and it did put these in my front plane. So if I went over, you see what I'm doing is all my dimensions in my front view that I really want there. I'm missing some. So let's go in and see what's happened with those, because this is typical. I really didn't want to do that. I should have probably put it on the front plane to begin with, but let's see what we can do. What I like to do for my 3D views is my very first 3D view, I like capturing all the different view planes. What you're doing by capturing all the different view planes rather than just like the front is you're really going in and saying, hey, all the dimensions that are in each one of these planes, show me in this view. So that's what I'm doing by clicking on all the dimensions. So I like to have my first view be my all dim view, or all 3D dim view. So dim view. So I have a view that really has all my dimensions in it. So now I really wanted like my A datum and even this flatness tolerance datum, and maybe even this one, to all really be in my front view. If I would have started in my front view, they would have all been there already. But I've got to show you how to move things from one view to the next, because this is typical. A lot of times you'll end up shooting the dimensions in automatically and they'll go to the wrong view. So if you right click on these dimensions, you can see it's in the top view now. So I can go ahead and say, hey, put that in the front view, and it moves it over to the front. So I could do that by control clicking and getting multiple dimensions at once, or I could go in and click them one by one. And actually this one is really belonging to the top view. So I should have just really left that right in the top view, and I'll deal with that later. So right now, let's go back to my front view and orient it and see and clean up some of the stuff I've got. Here is my perpendicular tolerance, and I really want to go in and do a few things. If I looked at the drawing, that was locked into a perpendicular mode to make it look nice and clean. And let's see. From here, I want to go in and tighten this tolerance to match the 1.25 microns. Very tight tolerance. I believe I've got enough zeros in there. Without my glasses on, microns, very tight tolerance. I believe I've got enough zeros in there. Without my glasses on, I kind of have to double check, but I believe that's about 1.25 microns. And I do have another tolerance to put on this that I can go ahead and put on right now for flatness. And let me go ahead and put that on at this point. And you'll see these will clean up as you go through and move those. They'll snap back, and you can pull the BA down and make that clean. So at this point in time, That's just kind of going in and featuring, auto dimensioning my hole and picking my main datums. Now let me go and clean this up a little bit more. I have a geometric tolerance surface profile was my 4 micrometers. So if I go in and put that in, and the trick with doing these is you can't click OK here. If you do, you'll just waste all your inputs that you've just done. And also, when you go put this on, what I'm doing is I'm clicking this onto my A datum surface, and then I'm clicking it one more time to place the location of the frame. And that's all you really have to do. What it should do at that point is it should take the datum target and go ahead and associate it to the surface profile tolerance that you just put on there. If you wanted to put it back, you could go ahead and click back the datum target A and then put it back on the surface or move it back to the frame. So that's the little area that you can change that back and forth on. So now that I've got my front kind of looking a little bit better, maybe I want to go ahead and capture that front view. And when I capture the front view, all I want is the dimensions for my front view in there. So I'll go ahead and uncheck all the other views that I had checked for my creation of the all 3D dimensions. From there, I'll go ahead and start looking at maybe some of my other views. Before I do that, let me go ahead and put in a few more dimensions in this view. So I'll go ahead and use the standard location dimension command, which is right now using my block tolerances, and I'll click here, and this is from plane to plane. So I'll go ahead and put this dimension in. These are just, again, plane to, let's go to that plane. Yeah, that goes to the center. That's looking at the notch that I've got in there. So it went, instead of going from this plane to that plane, it really took off and went to the center of the notch. Well, I can force that back on plane just by clicking there and plane, and then it's going to give you your normalized, from point to point dimension in there. So do a couple more of those. I'll go ahead and do one from here to here and try to get things going along a little quicker for you here. Let's kind of do a couple more. I don't really remember if both of these are the same size. I can see these aren't. So let me go in and look at this and go from here to here and pop a dimension on here. And maybe the other side is different. Don't really know. Side is different. Don't really know. I wasn't the one that modeled this part. Let me pop that dimension on there and go back to my front. And you see all the work that I've been doing on my front is automatically put into my front view. I can do the traditional cleanup stuff like, clicking on a dimension, clicking on the arrows to make them go to the other direction in there. And I can go in and do things like, well, since this 2.5 and this 2.5 are really the same, I didn't know they were going to be, I can easily go in and click both these dimensions with the control key down and combine the dimensions. And that'll go ahead and put that 2x counter in there for you. So if you did wipe one of these away, this would go back to just the 2.5 dimension in there. So that's one way of manually putting in the dimension in there. So that's one way of manually putting in the counter. But as I go through and get this information put in, I can go in and change any of it as well. So if I didn't want to show the true position here to ABC and I wanted to make that CAB or something, I can do that. Watch what happens when I go C with another C in here. It goes ahead and gives me a warning, and it would give me that warning on my datum in the feature tree as well. So it really won't allow you to make the mistakes that people can make using the older traditional GD&T tolerancing capability outside of our Dimexpert or model-based dimension GD&T. So this is a little smarter. It really is having constraint-based dimensioning put in behind it. So just changing a few things to, again, duplicate the drawing. in here. And I'd like my manufacturing vendor to get an overall size, although he could get this from the 3D model if it's not a type tolerance dimension. I'd want to fix that up and maybe put a few other dimensions in there. So let's look at how we do this again from scratch. It doesn't really matter if I stay oriented in my top view. Since I'm in my top view, I could go ahead and start dimensioning in this view, but I'm going to go ahead and reorient, and then I'm going to utilize my standard over there to go ahead and put this on a perpendicular vertical. So if I move it, it's just moved out with the arrow now. So I also might want to take the datum, because on his drawing, he's got the datum put on the surface right like that. So if I'm going to duplicate that as much as possible, then I can go ahead and do something like this and make it look pretty much like his drawing. His drawing, he's got the datum put on the surface right like that. So if I'm going to duplicate that as much as possible, then I can go ahead and do something like this and make it look pretty much like his drawing. So, and again, if I look at this and want to go ahead and create that captured view, I can do this at any time. Right now is a good time. I know I need a top view, and I only want the dimensions that are going to be in my top to show in it. So I'll go ahead and do that. So I do want to put a few more dimensions in here. Let me go ahead and add some locating dimensions for my overall, and those are going to be from, and maybe for the width dimension, I will put just a basic size dimension. So if I had all the other dimensions going across, it won't over constrain on me. And I'll go ahead and place my size dimension for my basic, and you can see it'll give me my frame around my dimension automatically. So really from there, my top view has some information in there. Let me put a little bit more. I'll go in and put a size dimension on the whole, and it'll go ahead and do the 8x counter and do my whole call out for me using the model-based definition dimensions. And again, if I go from front view back to my top view, there's no real reason for me to recapture my view unless I wanted to recapture the sizing of my view. All the dimensions that I put in there will automatically be in the top view the next time I go to it. But if I want the recapture command, and you can recapture, and you could even bring more dimensions in or notes in from another area. I'll do that a little later, but right now just for the top. So I've got my top view, I've got my front view. So back in the front view, I've noticed a few things. I want to go in and dimension some more of these true positions on these holes and slot width here. And I've noticed a setting that with my diameter dimensions, it's still falling into tolerance for symmetry here. So if I want to change that, of course I can go in and just turn off the tolerance like normal on this one, but if I want to do that for all the remaining dimensions I put on automatically, it's back to the options. So I'll often have to come back here and change the settings for remaining dimensions I put on automatically. It's back to the options. So I'll often have to come back here and change the settings for the bulk of the type of dimensioning I'm doing. So let's go ahead and put the diameter on block tolerances so we get that one done. And I'll leave the width on this bilateral tolerance so you can see where that comes in. So going in now and looking at these holes, I can see that this view is going to be pretty, full of dimensions. And on the original drawing, this information was on sheet 2. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a new annotation view. And when you insert a new annotation view, it's really asking you for the view plane in which you really want this new view to be created. So the back or front both would really work on this one for me. I'm really creating where I'd pick the dimensions that I want to bring into this view if I already dimensioned what I want to bring into the new view. But I don't, so I'm just going to go ahead and continue, and it'll go in and make that new annotation view. Now my recommendation here is every time you go make a new annotation view from scratch, go in there and rename it to something logical. Like this one, I can call front sheet 2 because it was on sheet 2. Whatever you really want, front detail of holes, second front, whatever it is. Logical name makes more sense. So now that I've renamed that view and I'm already oriented in that view, you can see because it's blue here. If I was oriented into another view, it would be blue. Like if I went in and did activate and orient to the front, you'll see that it'll be on the front view. So I want to go back and activate and reactivate my second front view, which in this case, it's kind of the same thing. So from here, I still really haven't captured the view. So if I'm going to go capture the view, remember to get it set for how you want to see the view in the thumbnail. I'll maximize the use of the screen and then go ahead and say capture view. And now you're going to see the new view that you just created in here. And all I really want is dimensions put into this view. I don't want any of the dimensions from the front view to come into this view. So uncheck the front view dimensions. Now you've got a brand new created view from scratch. If you're on that view and you go in and start dimensioning from there, then everything works real good. I don't have to stay in 2D to do this. I like staying in 3D a lot. It's more spatial orientation part, for what I'm doing. So and start putting the size dimensions on and grabbing, these different features. But what I really want to do is, use the geometric dimension and tolerancing for this in my datums. So I'll go into the auto dimensioning again, and I'll go ahead and use geometric dimensioning. And for my primary datum, I'm going to pick what was plain C. And you notice when you pick plain C that it shows the C over here in the menu. So I'm going to put this on C, A, and B. And then I'm going to go ahead and dimension this feature. Because I right click now, it went down to the selected features. And I always have selected features. And dimension this feature. Because I right click now, it went down to the selected features. And I always have selected features rather than all checked. So I'll go ahead and select this feature to dimension. And I'll select this feature to dimension. And I can even select this width feature in here to dimension and make it a width feature. And with those features selected, I will go ahead and hit go. And you can see it really puts on a lot of work into my new sheet 2. So I can go in and clean these dimensions up pretty clean, or I should say pretty quick. It all works the same way as traditional dimensioning. If I want my dimensions flipped or something, I can do that. So you can see, and really done a good job with the different dimensioning. On this one, I might want to go in, and this one was actually brought out to 4 decimal places on the drawing that I'm duplicating, and same with the tolerance. And they were also showing this with dual dimensions since it's a dowel hole. So again, just real quick way, if you want to resize and get everything on here, you might want to recapture. Also, recapturing will show the dimensions that you have in this view. It's not really necessary, but I like doing it as I go along sometimes just to, reframe everything and get stuff a little cleaner. That's as much as I'm really going to clean it up for now. But again, remember as I go through and start looking at my dimensions, if I gave this model to somebody in SOLIDWORKS, even if they didn't have the model-based definition add-on, they would get access to these views. When they're looking at these views, if they clicked on something like the A, it's going to highlight what dimensions that belongs to. You can see what's going on with all my clicking on here. It's really going through and highlighting the features to show exactly where those extension lines go to. So let's go back to the front. I think that's, you know, a fair amount of dimensions for the little time that I really put in to dimensioning. I could get into cleaning this up more and getting a little nitpicky about it, but I think you guys get the picture of what's going on there. And from here, yeah, let me show why is it giving me all these location dimensions. Missed a setting under geometric tolerancing called create basic dims. If you don't have this checked, it won't create your basic dimensions automatically for you and put in those place count holders. So when you're doing this, really after I start using that initial pattern feature, I really like to go change my tree display to an annotation-based tree. So once you get going, this tree kind of makes more sense. It shows you your datums and kind of gives you your list in a different mode. If I didn't have these location dimensions on automatically, you could right click on the position feature and say create or recreate basic dims, and it'll put your basic dims on there. So that's another method if you forgot to do it in the beginning or didn't check it in the beginning. There's usually a way to go back and kind of fix things up pretty quick. Create basic dims, and it'll put your basic dims on there. So that's another method if you forgot to do it in the beginning or didn't check it in the beginning. There's usually a way to go back and kind of fix things up pretty quick. So from here, a couple last views that I really want to dive into and make because there are some nuances to it are the right view and maybe a section view or duplicating what some of those detail views were duplicating. So let's take a look. If we go back in to the tree and look at the product from the right, activate and reorient, this is where I want to start dimensioning information on this side. And if I came in here, I could capture the right side view right now before putting dimensions in, or I can put dimensions in and then capture it. Doesn't really matter. I kind of like sometimes to go ahead and capture it because I know I'm going to need a right-hand view. And then anytime I click on that right-hand view, it'll automatically do the activate and reorient to go from there. So in something like this, I generally go out and grab a size dimension. As stated in the beginning of the video, you click, and this was created using a sketched fillet, and then the sketch was mirrored over, and we've got all sorts of non-related fillets there. So how do we go back in and relate those fillets? Well, we go back into pattern feature, and then we go to the manual. So I can do this anytime along the process. Collect all the fillets. You can see this might be a little time consuming. I'm doing this in real time, trying to make it as real world as possible so you can see some of the things you run into. I've got these on the back side of the part too, so keep going. Now I might have already had these as, X8, and I could go in and create the other ones X8. Then I could do what I did in the beginning of the video by combining those dimensions. So I'll do that little bit of that with the pocket features in here to mix it up a little bit. But right now I did grab all 16 fillets in there. And if I go ahead and check that, and now go back into my size dimension, click on the fillet, and you're going to see the 16x. Now, maybe I like that dimension to show on another fillet. You do the exact same thing you would in SOLIDWORKS. You can just drag and drop that to another edge, and it'll go ahead and put it onto that edge. On this node, I'd probably like to go ahead and put for the far and near sides. And here, and here, and continue forward. We'll maybe put my space in here. Let me get a little nitpicky about that. And I can continue. I can go grab some size dimensions for my hole. This doesn't have any GD&T on it, so that'll be fine for that. Now let me go in and start grabbing some of these pocket dimensions. because I want to show you some of the options on that as well. So if I went in and did this manually, I can go in through the size dimension. Could also be a location dimension from plane to plane. But when you do the size dimension, it can also do the counters for you. So let me go in and do a size dimension, and I'm going to put one right here, and it's going to be a width dimension. And right there, bilateral tolerance. So you know what? I don't want to do this right now because I'd have a bunch of dimensions coming in with bilateral that I'd have to fix. Since I realize that now, let me go back in to my options. Like I said, sometimes you do this often. You'll go back into your width dimension and maybe use block tolerances on there. All right. And maybe rather than using the size dimensions and doing it one by one, I'll go ahead and use my auto dimensioning. And I'll just do plus or minus dimensions on this. So I'll turn it off, the geometric dimensioning and tolerancing. And I don't really need to pick my datums if I'm not using some, you know, true position frames or anything like that. So in here, I'll go ahead and select the feature. And it's just like selecting it with the size command. It's going to bring up the same options. I want this to be a width option. So I'm going to go select the other side in the feature menu. Now I can keep going with this and select this width right here as well and tell it it's a width. It tried to see that as a pocket. Let me try to do that again and just show you. It started off as a pocket, and then it would have given me the depth dimensions and everything. I don't want that. I do want the width dimensions, so I again just go to width and pick the width and check it and say okay. So it's going to dimension both those widths all in one. If I wanted to keep going and I knew there was some stuff on the other side of the part, I could, you know, come in and grab these as well. So I might as well go grab a couple more of them. That width and this width as well. And then go ahead and check it and go back to my right, and you'll see it'll give me my place that dimension in there nice and neat. How's that for you? So I could continue with the length dimensions. Maybe I do these a little differently. I'll go in and let's just see. We'll use the auto dimension again and plus or minus and go in and do the same thing with creating some width dimensions here. And again, not the pocket, but the width. And I'll just go ahead and put those in because this is real world. You end up putting some in a lot that you realize afterwards that there's some more on the other side of the part. So what I'm going to do is just go over to the other side of the part and pretty much do the same thing. So I'll go in and auto dimension this side of my part that you realize afterwards that there's some more on the other side of the part. So what I'm going to do is just go over to the other side of the part and pretty much do the same thing. So I'll go in and auto dimension this side of my part, do the same thing, just grab a couple of the widths. I know this would really be the length of the pocket comparative to the width, but the type of dimension that we're doing and repeating on here is width. Width and length are really the same thing in here. It's just going from one inside or outside plane to the other. Up. And I mispicked there. So what you're going to have to do is clear that plane selection and then go back in and put your other width selection in because I mispicked. Easy to do. Happens all the time with. So, and now I can go back over to my right side plane and notice that, you know, hey, these would be a lot nicer if I went ahead and clicked on these with the control key down and said combine dimensions. Here, not sure why that didn't combine them. Let's just see if we can force this in anyway. So if we click on two of these and try to combine them, combine those, and then do this last one, combine. There's a will, there's a way. Now I could have just gone in and, came down to this area and put in the 4x, but if one of the pockets gets to counter in the database, so that's why I like doing that. It's really the right way to do it in model-based dimensioning. So I can go in and do that. Some of these other locating dimensions, I'll just go ahead and use the locate dimension. If my locate dimension's set for my block tolerance now in the options, I believe it is, then I'm just going to get the dimensions that I want in here. So, and again, if I wanted to put a counter in there, I could easily come down here and put in like 2x. I feel much safer about this stuff that's not really going to change from something from side to side. Let me keep that a capital. And then I'd do the same thing with placing some more locations from feature to feature. And maybe another one from the top here to the top here. And again, you could place your 2 or your 4x in the dimension manually as well. So there's my right side. Like to zoom in, get the zoom right, fix up some of the dimensions, clean them up, make them look a little better for what I'm doing here. If it fits inside there, I'll use it. So I might do slightly different. How's that for you? Okay, so one more view. Not a bad idea to go ahead and recapture this one by right-clicking and doing the recapture, so you see all the dimensions in there. Plus, it's got a new zoom level to this view with all those dimensions in, so why not go ahead and recapture it? In there. Plus, it's got a new zoom level to this view with all those dimensions in, so why not go ahead and recapture it? All right, so a couple more views to do, and then we'll be done, and we'll be able to go in and create a 3D PDF with this. So some of these arrows I might even want to flip around and make look normal as well. So let's get into doing a section view. To do a section view, if you know you're going to need to do a section view, this is where I'm going to show the machinist that there's some undercut in here. It's kind of nice to do, even though he could get it off the 3D model. If he's going to quote it, he needs to make sure he's got the type of tool that'll go in there and do the undercut with the depth that is all okay inside this area and this area and here. So what I want to do is go ahead and again recapture or create a new annotation view from scratch, because I'm going to want only the dimensions in for the section view. From there, do I want to put any of these dimensions in it? No, I don't. I want to start it from scratch. And then again, whenever you create a new annotation view, it's probably best to go ahead and name that view. I'll call this section view 1 in here. Now, before capturing the view, this is where you'll want to go ahead and put it into the right section view mode. And when you do that, make sure that you don't have the graphics only selection selected, so you can be less limited in what you can do in the section view. Although there are some limitations that I will show you, I'll show you also how to work around them. So with this view set, I really should have had it oriented, because now when I go in and reorient the view, I'll show you also how to work around them. So with this view set, I really should have had it oriented, because now when I go in and reorient the view, it's going to turn off the section view. So all I really need to do before capturing the view is turn that section view back on and then go ahead and capture the view. Now when I capture the view, I'm only going to capture the section view. rather than the right view. So I'll uncheck right. And since I don't have any dimensions in the section view yet, this is what I'm left with for my section view. So now let me get in and go ahead and put some dimensions on this view right here. In the drawing I'm duplicating, they've got this one set. You can just keep going when you're in this locate dimension and one more view from here to here, or one more dimension there. And all these dimensions really are 2x because I've got them on this side of my part. So if I came into here and looked at cleaning these up a bit, however you determine that, some people have their preference on this and are a little better at it than I am, but that's good enough for me for now. And what I'll do is I'll go ahead and put the 2x. And really make, so there's a couple different ways to do notes. And you generally want, when you're going to make notes, to snap the note view in with it, or even create extra note views if you've got notes in each additional view that aren't tied into all one view. So I'll show you what I mean by this. In this captured section view, I didn't put notes in here, and I'm not gonna on this one because you don't have to create a note, but let me show you some of the issues that come up, and they come up sometimes and not others. So let me just go through this and see what happens. I'm going to go in and create a note, and I'm going to put it in the section view on this piece right here. So I'm really getting into the model for that leader and clicking, and you can already see that it kind of looks like the note, already see that it kind of looks like the note, let's see, 2x, is getting messed up. It's going into like the side view, the other side view for the note. And that's really because I'm picking on the surface and it's in the section view mode. So it orients itself to another view. And in this case, a lot of times when you right click and try to move this into the view you want, like in this case, I want to move it into the section view. So I can do that. I can go ahead and section view and see if I can fix it, and go back to section view and see how it looks. So that's really the fix for that. It didn't automatically go in the section view even though I was in there. And that can happen sometimes. I like doing notes. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll just go ahead and put the note in, and then let's go 2x on this one, both sides. And then what I'm going to do, I can keep this one in here if I want. I can go ahead and use the same technique you'd use in the standard notes to go ahead and illustrate what I'm really trying to say here. And if I did too many, I goofed on that one. I think I got to come over there and hit one delete or something, and then maybe just get rid of this note because I really don't want them both in there. So I think that depicts what's going on with these dimensions pretty well here, and this is a nice way to do it. Now again, I might want to go ahead and just to make this all up to date with the size of zoom, hit the recapture again. And in this case, keep in the annotation view note 1 that's in there so the note stays. And in this case, keep in the annotation view note 1 that's in there so the note stays in. And you can go from one view back to the view with notes to check to see that everything's okay. So now this was one of the dilemmas I ran into. When we go in and try to dimension this in the section view, even if I did this using the standard dimensions in SOLIDWORKS, If I try to do it in 3D, it's not finding this silhouette edge under any of the dimension commands. So what we really have to do at this point is go in and create another section view that's sectioned in the front, and I'll do one as well as the back, and then zoom in on it and snap that view, and that becomes your detail view. So that's the process I'm going to go through. I'll go ahead and create a new view from scratch by using the in this view. And if I go in and create a view, like I said, I like to rename it right away, something like Detail View 1 here. I want to make sure that I keep active on this view, and then I can go ahead and orient it with that view active, and then put on the section view. Again, I'm going to have to go back and reorient, but let me go ahead. I make sure the graphics only section isn't checked. In this case, it really doesn't matter because I'm not doing too much in the view. And push this out to where I see that hole appear in my section view. Get it anywhere along there should be fine. And again, reorient. Appear in my section view. Get it anywhere along there should be fine. And again, reorient. Turn on the section, or double section, I should say in this case. Zoom in on it and capture the view. When I capture it, I'll only want the stuff in the detail view to show up, and I don't have anything there yet, so it's a fresh view to start with for detailing this stuff out. And then I can go ahead and use the model-based definition size tool for grabbing the diameter. And if it grabs the inside and you want the outside of the cylinder, just instead of grabbing the whole, say cylinder, and it'll go out to the other edge. And I can go ahead and put this icon in. I can go ahead and put this icon in, change the way the icon's going to look there, and go ahead and snap that view. Oh, I already snapped the view. I make that mistake a lot. Let me go ahead and delete that snap view because this is already going to be inside of this view right here. So you might even do something like putting this on 2x both sides. And it might be that I did want the whole section cut in two different planes for this view, so that one worked out well. And I could continue to go in and grab my size dimensions, locate dimensions, and detail more stuff out. But I think you guys get the picture at this point in time. I'm running into an hour-long video showing you how to set this up correctly. And I wanted to make it real world, so sorry about the length of the video. From here, what you would do is you could pass this part file to anybody using SOLIDWORKS and they would obtain all these views. And on a detail like this, you might even want to just snap it in 3D so they can really see that it is a section view like this. So I could leave it in 3D and go ahead and recapture it in this 3D detail view mode as well. So that's probably a better way to do that. From here, I don't want to bore you. Most of the dimensions that I've put on this model are the tight tolerance dimensions, the GD&T that needs to go on here. And I also have the ability to go in and show the tolerance status on the model and see what might be over dimensioned or under dimensioned in the model. I really haven't completed this all the way out yet, but I really have all the dimensions on here that I want. I did go in and put a couple extras on so you could see what the tolerance status shows when you have extra dimensions in the model in there, as well as some things that are under constraint still from being fully defined. So let me go in and turn off the tolerance status, and let me go in and do one last thing, and then we'll go in and create the 3D PDF file. So really to get in and show you how to do notes correctly that would be locked in, let me go in and do one last thing, and then we'll go in and create the 3D PDF file. So really to get in and show you how to do notes correctly that would be locked into a particular view, let me go in and put a note in the front view. And in a note with the front view, we might want to put something in about like this A datum being on both sides of the part, because using this model-based definition technology, I could do what was in the original drawing, which I could do anyway. I could go in and put a 2x into our dimension into here, or I can go ahead and put a note in and just say both sides of the part. So maybe I'll go ahead and put the note in. So in order to put a note in, you might want to recapture the view. And if you don't have any notes in the, go ahead and capture the notes area along with the front view. That way it'll allow for notes to always go in the 2D plane when you put the notes in. So, and I could go ahead and put notes in that I have in my notes library file, where I might just have some standard notes I drop in like this right here. Or rather than dropping in standard notes, I could drop in linked notes that link into my materials property, or I could just write a note from scratch. So let me do that. In this particular dimension, I want to go ahead and put in more symbols. And I'm going to put in a triangle 1 for the first note. Then I'll come over and I'll use my standard note command to do the same thing. I'll go ahead and put in my triangle 1, and then I'll put in there. So I'll add a note that'll even be view specific, so it's really easy to find where the note is that goes along with the triangle, because it is very view specific. I couldn't really make it any easier here. Plus, when anybody clicks on this file, whether it's in eDrawings, the PDF file, or in here, it's going to highlight the view for you. So if you want to see that note in your little view stamp here, you can go ahead and recapture the view. You really don't need to do that. The note is in there anyway. If you do recapture the view, make sure you recapture it with the notes in there as well for that particular view. And from here on out, it really is just going in to publish the PDF, picking the right template for the PDF. Now, if you don't have a template already made, I will be doing a video on laying out a template that looks a whole lot like the a drawing template. And I do bring in the information from the model properties, even the tolerances from the block tolerances from where I showed you in the beginning of the video. So really from here, it's ready to go. We can go ahead and make sure the properties that we want are going to be synced in here and hit the go button. I've already got one in here. I'll just overwrite it. Up, I already have that one in there. So let me rename this to something else. I'll call it new, and we'll save that off and see what that looks like. It looks a little distorted here in the preview. Don't worry about that. Once you go ahead and create the PDF, it will create a nice looking PDF. I will say that in working with different vendors, particularly the ones that have SOLIDWORKS, create the PDF, it will create a nice looking PDF. I will say that in working with different vendors, particularly the ones that have SOLIDWORKS, if you put all the notes in the 3D views, there really is no reason to create a PDF file. So if it's an in-house application and you can go ahead and just send the SOLIDWORKS file, that's all that's needed. If it's going to be outsourced to vendors, then you can go ahead and use the PDF. What I've done is I've created one PDF that really will go in and show all those different views. And the title block again is syncing from my model properties. So if you looked in my title block, the things that I have, like my 2 decimal places, 3 decimal place tolerances, are coming from my model, along with my material type, the name, the revision, spinning, or the zooming with the middle wheel, and the spinning with the left mouse button, or you can use the menu over here to pan, spin, and zoom. When you want to navigate to the different views that I created, you can just click on them and they'll navigate to them. I took out my all 3D view. I only use that for creating my other views. So you can see that if I want to click on any of the dimensions, it will highlight. So if I go ahead and spin my model, you're going to see any dimension that I click on, it's going to highlight the surfaces that it goes to. So as you go through and click on any of this stuff, you're going to see it highlighting all the different features. So that's really it for creating a model-based definition document and creating it into a PDF file. Thanks for watching an extended video from GoEngineer.